Hi, this is Nir Eyal, and welcome to part 6 of How to Become Indistractable, where I teach you how to control your attention and choose your life. And in this section, we are going to talk about how to raise indistractable children. You know, if you think the world is distracting now, just wait a few years. The world that our children will inhabit is one that is going to be filled with even more distractions than we have today in our own world, with augmented reality and virtual reality, and who knows what else is going to happen in reality. There are going to be more distractions than ever before as this trend of increasingly pervasive and persuasive technology continues. So it is absolutely imperative that we teach our children how to become indistractable. This is truly the skill of the century, that there will be a bifurcation among children who grow up to be adults who have their attention and their time manipulated and controlled by others, and people who stand up and say, no, I am indistractable, I control my attention, I will choose my life. So how do we raise indistractable kids? Well, we need to start with understanding that we're not raising kids, we're raising future adults. And that means that we need to stop deflecting blame. That since time immemorial, techno panics are nothing new. We have always thought as parents that something outside of our kids is turning their brains to mush. I mean, you see this with every successive generation. In my generation, they thought it was television that was melting our brains, and before that it was rock and roll music and Dungeons and Dragons and comic books. This happens with every generation, that parents love to blame stuff outside of their kids for influencing them and melting their minds, and that's never the problem. There's always something else going on. In this generation, we seem to be blaming technology for causing all the ills of society, particularly when it comes to our children. But we need to realize that tech isn't the problem. It's not the tech that's evil, that in fact, we want our kids to be comfortable with technology. Look, their jobs are going to rely upon them being comfortable with technology. So we don't want to teach our kids to be scared of technology. We want to teach them to be indistractable, and we absolutely can do that. Now, how do we do that? How do we teach our kids to be indistractable? We use the same model that we talked about in the first 4 parts of this course, where we help them master these internal triggers. We help them make time for traction, help them remove those external triggers, and help them prevent distraction with Pacts. So we're going to run very quickly through these 4 steps and give you some examples of how we can teach our kids the Indistractable model so that they can integrate it into their own lives. Starting with understanding and mastering these internal triggers. Again, internal triggers are these uncomfortable emotional states that drive our behavior: loneliness, uncertainty, fatigue, anxiety, stress. This is why we look for distraction, to escape this internal discomfort. Now, we have to understand that children today, by and large, are deficient in these psychological nutrients. These psychological nutrients that psychologists have found consist of this need for mastery, autonomy, and relatedness. These are 3 psychological nutrients that every human on the face of the earth needs, according to self-determination theory. This is a very well-established theory of human flourishing and motivation. Every psychologist on the face of the earth knows it very well. It's very well studied. It's over 40 years old, this theory. Lots of research backing this up. And we know that every single human being needs those 3 psychological nutrients of mastery, autonomy, and relatedness. Unfortunately, children today are deficient in these 3 psychological nutrients. They don't get enough sense of mastery, autonomy, and relatedness. And so where do they go? They look for alternatives. They substitute what they're not getting offline with finding these these psychological nutrients online. So we need to make sure that kids have sufficient amounts of the sense of agency, mastery, and relatedness in their offline lives so they're not constantly looking for it online. There's a much deeper explanation that we don't have time to go into today, but there's very practical tips in my book, Indistractable, which you can use right away with your child to help make sure they have enough of these psychological nutrients in their day. Because remember this, that overuse of distracting technology is the symptom, not the disease. It is a symptom of an underlying dysfunction. So next, how about making time for traction? How do we do that? Well, there's many things that we can do, starting with teaching children this concept of traction, that the opposite of distraction is traction. But you can't know what a distraction is unless they know what is traction. You have to decide what you got distracted from in order to say that you got distracted from anything. So kids need to make and keep a schedule. It's incredibly important that children, starting from a very young age, learn to schedule their day, to know that time is a finite resource, and that if we don't plan ahead, then we plan to waste time. So we have to let kids do that, but along the way, letting them fail. Knowing that, hey, you know what, you didn't finish your homework today. That's a real bummer. How can we plan for making sure that you have time to do your homework, time to play video games, time to watch television, time to be with your friends? Great, all fine activities as long as we make time for them in our day. Even the time we plan to waste is not wasted time. Next, the external triggers. How do we teach kids to hack back those external triggers that can so often lead them to distraction? Well, there's many things we can do. We have to make sure that kids learn how to use these technologies in a progressive fashion, that we don't want to just shove a smartphone in a kid's face. We want to make sure that they are ready to use this technology. A good test to make sure that your child is ready to use a particular technology is to know that they are capable of turning it off. If they're not capable of leaving the phone or the iPad in their room or somewhere else when they come to the dinner table, they're not ready to use it. If they don't know how to turn the phone off or turn it on to do not disturb mode while they're doing homework, they're not ready for it. We have to make sure that they understand how to use these technologies or they don't get them. But then also we need to make sure that there is absolutely nothing that disturbs their sleep. That some of the negative psychological effects that we have seen over the past few years related to technology use, turns out it's not the technology use itself, it's the fact that it is coming at the expense of sleep. So we want to make sure that children, when they go into their bedrooms, that there's nothing that beeps or buzzes or creates any kind of distracting light or sound of any kind that could interrupt their sleep. That sleep is absolutely essential for physiological and psychological well-being. There absolutely needs to be no devices, no laptops, no phones in the bedroom at night, including older technologies, no radio, no television. Anything that disrupts sleep should not have a place in the bedroom. We should remove those external triggers. And finally, remember, don't be the external trigger yourself. If a child has planned time in their day to play video games, be with a friend, do their homework, don't interrupt them. Well, you see this all the time. Parents telling kids to do what the parent wants them to do. Meanwhile, the kid wants to do their activity. And if they've scheduled it, if it's in their calendar, even if it is playing a video game, you as the parent needs to respect that time. Don't be the external trigger. Don't be the distraction yourself. And finally, teach them how to make pacts so that they can avoid distraction. There's all kinds of pacts we talked about in the fourth episode of this series around effort pacts, price pacts, and identity pacts. We want to make sure that our children, they form this identity of being indistractable themselves, that they realize that a bit of skepticism is a good thing, that we know that these tech companies are designing their products and services to hook you, right? They are designing these products to get you to use them as much as possible. And they're never going to tell you you've had enough. That's our responsibility. So we want to put kids in charge. We want to give them the opportunity to make their own rules, and then we help them abide by the rules they make for themselves. That's how we give them a greater sense of autonomy and control over this skill, which frankly, this is not something that they'll need just in their school years. This is a lifelong skill we have to teach them. Again, we are raising future adults. So if we can teach kids how to become indistractable, how to manage their own time and attention, that is a lifelong skill that will pay dividends for the rest of their life. So in summary here, make sure we avoid these convenient excuses and blame things outside ourselves like the technology. Take responsibility for those actions by helping our kids understand their internal triggers, help them make time for traction, help them hack back those external triggers that don't serve them, teach them how to prevent distraction with Pacts, and this is how we can raise indistractable kids. Now, in the next video, we'll talk about how to have indistractable relationships. I hope you'll join me, as well as follow me on LinkedIn, as well as check out my website for more information. That website is nirandfar.com. Nir spelled like my first name. Until then, I hope you stay strong and stay indistractable.